I never thought a random night in a hostel bunk bed could turn into the kind of story I'd tell over and over, but here we are. I was supposed to be alone, just me, my backpack, and a vague plan to explore a new city for a couple of days. Instead, I ended up with a complete stranger crawling into my bed. And not in the way you'd think, like some awkward mix-up or awkwardly polite, sorry, wrong bunk moment. No, this was something way less ordinary. So here's how it started. I flew into Lisbon late afternoon after a week of what I can only describe as brutal burnout at work. You know that feeling when your brain's a fried circuit board? And even the idea of making decisions feels like climbing Everest? Yeah, that was me. My only goal was to find a cheap, no-frills hostel, crash, and let the city's sunshine do its magic. I checked into this tiny, slightly run-down place just a few blocks from Bairro Alto. Old wooden floors that creaked every time you stepped, peeling paint on the walls and the faint smell of too much spray cleaner mixed with wet towels. Classic hostel vibe. They put me in a dorm room with 6 beds, all mostly empty except for one guy who I'd caught glimpses of earlier. He was sitting on the top bunk near the window, headphones in, scribbling something in a notebook, dark hair falling over his eyes, a subtle buzz cut, and jeans that looked worn but clean. I shuffled in, dropped my bag on the floor, and tried to settle in. The usual routine. Charge my phone, brush my teeth, maybe peek out the window at whatever city noise was happening. The guy on the top bunk didn't say much, just a nod when I looked up. I figured he was one of those quiet travelers who kept to themselves, and honestly, that's exactly what I wanted. Hours later, I was halfway through a book when the power flickered out. Turns out, Lisbon was having one of those random blackouts that last long enough to mess with your plans but not long enough to be really useful. The hallway light went dead, the street lamps outside blinked off, and suddenly the entire hostel felt way smaller and more intimate. I could hear faint voices from other rooms, but mostly it was just the creaks and groans of an old building settling in the dark. I fumbled around for my phone's flashlight and paused when I heard a soft knock on my door. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but then the knock came again, hesitant but deliberate. "Hey, sorry to bother you," a voice said. It was the guy from the top bunk. "The blackout's kind of thrown everything off and, well, my bunk's right under this leaking pipe. It's dripping pretty bad, and I don't really want to sleep soaking wet." I blinked, surprised. I mean, I'd noticed the drip earlier, but hadn't really cared. "Oh yeah, I think that's happened before. You can just come down here if you want. No problem." There was a pause then. "Thanks." I didn't want to just barge in or anything. I stepped aside, and he climbed down the ladder quietly. He was about my height, a little lean, and smelled faintly of coffee and peppermint gum. We exchanged names. He's Lucas, and that's when it started to feel less like two strangers sharing some random dorm, and more like the beginning of something I didn't expect. He set up a little spot on the floor next to my bed with his sleeping bag, but then, right before we both tried to settle in, the pipe burst again, flooding the corner where he was planning to sleep. Without thinking, I said, "Just come up here. I'm not using the bed. I was planning on crashing on the floor anyway." Lucas hesitated, looked like he was weighing his options, then nodded. "Thanks, man." And just like that, a complete stranger climbed into my bed, and neither of us knew how that night was about to change everything. So Lucas climbed up, awkward but grateful, and settled in right beside me. The mattress creaked under the extra weight, and the room suddenly felt a lot smaller. I wasn't completely sure what to say next. There's always that weird moment when two strangers share a bed but don't even know if they should talk or stay silent. I mean, we weren't close or anything, but it definitely wasn't normal. I broke the silence first, probably to avoid the awkwardness drowning us. "So what brings you to Lisbon? Just passing through?" He hesitated like he was thinking carefully about how much to share, which is kind of ironic since we were crammed into this tiny bed together. "Work, mostly. I'm a graphic designer, freelance. Thought a change of scenery would help me get out of a rut, and I guess get some inspiration." I nodded. "Same, in a way. I'm just burnt out from my job, in marketing. Needed to get away before I completely lost it." He laughed, a little dry but genuine. "Marketing, huh? I've had friends in that world. Sounds brutal. Yeah, it's a grind. Endless meetings, deadlines, the usual nightmare." I looked over at him, noticing the way the dim light from my phone cast soft shadows over his face. His eyes were still alert, even if he looked tired. "So, freelance graphic designer. Does that mean you can make me a killer logo or something?" Lucas smirked. "Maybe for the right price." I grinned. "I'm all ears." We both laughed, and just like that, the tension eased. It felt surprisingly natural, like two people who usually wouldn't talk, suddenly figuring something out in the dark. The power was still out, but the city noises filtered in, the distant hum of a car, the occasional shout from a late-night wanderer. The blackout made the world feel smaller, quieter, and for a moment, more honest. "So, you came here to find inspiration," I said, tracing imaginary shapes on the bedsheet. "Do you think you found it?" Lucas was quiet for a second, then said, "Maybe. I think sometimes you have to step outside your comfort zone to shake things up. But honestly, I wasn't expecting to share a bed with a stranger on the first night." I laughed. Neither was I. Definitely not part of the plan. We fell into a comfortable silence after that, just listening to the sounds of the city and the comforting creaks of the old building settling around us. Then, out of nowhere, Lucas reached over and turned off my phone's flashlight. "Too bright," he said softly. I appreciated the gesture, even if I was a little surprised by how close he was. The darkness made everything feel more private, more intimate. I shifted a little, and he did too, so that we were lying pretty close. I won't lie. I was aware of him in a way that surprised me. His warmth, the slight scent of soap mixed with that peppermint gum again, it was oddly grounding. Before I could overthink it, I asked, "Have you ever just met someone like this before? Total strangers, just thrown together?" Lucas chuckled quietly. "Not really. I'm usually the guy who keeps to himself, blends into the background." "Same," I admitted. "I'm not exactly Mr. Social Butterfly." He looked at me then, eyes reflecting the faint moonlight through the window. Maybe that's why this is kind of nice. Forced to connect, even if it's just for one night. There's something about the way he said that, kind of vulnerable, but with this steady calmness, that made me want to reach out, to keep talking. But just as I was about to say something else, a sudden noise from the hallway startled us, a door slamming somewhere down the hall. We both sat up instantly, the moment broken. "Probably just someone coming back late," I said, trying to sound casual. Lucas nodded but didn't lie back down right away. Instead, he just sat there, legs dangling over the edge of the bed, looking thoughtful. After a beat, he said, "You know, this whole night feels like one of those weird little moments that ends up meaning more than you expect." I laughed softly, feeling the same. "Yeah, like the universe's way of messing with us." He smiled, and I caught a glimpse of something in his eyes. A flicker of hope, or maybe just the relief of company. We stayed up talking until the lights flickered back on around 2 a.m., and the hostel slowly stirred to life again. When the power came back, it felt like the spell was broken, but by then, it didn't really matter. For the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe I wasn't so alone after all, and as we finally drifted off, sharing that creaky mattress, I realized this was only the beginning of a story I hadn't seen coming. Morning came slow and gentle, the kind of light that filters through old curtains and makes everything look softer. I woke up with a dull ache in my back from sharing a bed not made for two, but also with this strange feeling of peace I hadn't expected. Lucas was still there, half turned toward me, eyes closed, breathing steady. It was weirdly comforting, like having someone else in the room made this strange place feel a little less lonely. I lay there for a while, just watching him, thinking about how last night had unfolded. We were still strangers technically, but something had shifted. I guess when you share a bed with someone, even a stranger, the usual walls come down faster. Eventually, Lucas stirred and opened his eyes. He caught me staring and grinned. "Morning," he said, voice still thick with sleep. "Morning," I replied, sitting up and rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "Did you sleep at all?" "Better than I expected," he said, stretching his arms over his head. "You?" "Same. Honestly, I think that blackout did us a favor." He chuckled, then glanced around the room like he was noticing everything for the first time. "So what's the plan today? I mean, besides not getting soaked by any more surprise leaks?" I laughed. No leaks, I hope. I was thinking of grabbing some coffee, maybe wandering the Alfama district. You? Sounds good. I was hoping to hit a gallery or two, maybe find a spot with good light to work on some sketches. Jury's out if I'm actually productive on vacation, or just end up eating a lot of pastries, I said. Lucas laughed again, this time without any of the hesitation. I'm definitely more on the pastry team. We ended up grabbing breakfast together downstairs in this cramped but cozy cafe attached to the hostel. The place was buzzing with travelers and locals alike. The smell of fresh bread and strong coffee everywhere. Our conversation picked up easily, like we'd known each other longer than a few hours in a shared bed. Lucas told me about his freelance work, the highs and lows of chasing creative projects without a steady paycheck, the freedom and the uncertainty. I opened up about the marketing gig I'd left behind, the burnout that pushed me to book the trip, and the vague hope that some time away might clear my head. By the time we finished breakfast, it felt natural to suggest exploring together. Neither of us had any solid plans, and wandering a new city with someone who wasn't just a face in a crowd sounded way better than going solo. As we walked through the winding streets, sunlight bouncing off the colorful tiles and graffiti, I found myself noticing all these little things about Lucas. The way he paused to stare at a street artist's painting, the easy smile he gave to strangers, how he talked animatedly when he found a building that caught his eye. His enthusiasm was contagious. At one point, we ducked into a tiny art gallery tucked away on a quiet street. The walls were lined with pieces from local artists, abstract paintings, black and white photos, a few sculptures. Lucas lingered by a set of ink drawings, tracing lines with his finger like he could feel the artist's hand. "Want to see something?" he asked, pulling a small sketchbook from his bag. I nodded, intrigued. He flipped through pages filled with rough sketches, some faces, some cityscapes, and then paused at a drawing of a man sitting on a bench, looking thoughtful. "That's from a park back in Porto. I like capturing moments where people look like they're lost in their own worlds." "Looks amazing," I said. "You've got a real eye for this." He shrugged, a little shy. "Thanks. It's just something I do to stay sane." We spent the afternoon wandering, stopping for coffee again, sitting on a bench, watching the world go by. At some point, our conversation shifted from casual to more personal, talking about dreams, fears, the kinds of things people usually keep to themselves until they feel safe enough. I told him about the loneliness I'd been feeling, even before the burnout, the kind that creeps up when you're surrounded by people but still feel invisible. Lucas nodded like he understood completely, and shared his own story of moving between cities, always feeling like an outsider trying to find a place to belong. It wasn't all heavy, though. We joked about our disastrous attempts at speaking Portuguese, the ridiculous tourist traps we'd fallen for, and the weird hostel roommates we'd encountered. As the sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow over the city, Lucas glanced over at me and said, "I'm glad that blackout happened. Otherwise, we might have never talked." Me too, I thought, but I kept that to myself. When we got back to the hostel, the atmosphere felt different. There was an easy silence between us, like a shared secret that didn't need words. I was about to turn in when Lucas looked at me and said, "Want to grab a drink later? There's a little bar down the street that does this amazing gin tooltail." I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." And just like that, what started as a random night with a stranger in a hostel bed had turned into something I actually wanted to see unfold. I wasn't sure where it was going yet, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. Later that evening, the streets were alive with that unmistakable Lisbon buzz, the chatter of people spilling out of bars, the faint twang of a guitar from a nearby corner, and the soft glow of street lamps casting gold over the cobblestones. Lucas and I walked side by side toward that little bar he had mentioned, a narrow place tucked between two brightly painted buildings, the kind of spot you'd miss if you blinked. Inside, it was cozy and dim, the kind of place with mismatched furniture and an old jukebox humming softly in the corner. The bartender, a woman with a sharp smile and tattoos peeking from her sleeves, slid us 2 menus without fuss. Lucas immediately ordered the gin tooltail he'd been raving about, and I went with whatever he recommended. We found a small table near the back, and as the drinks arrived, the conversation turned quieter, more intimate. There was something about the low light and the gentle hum of other conversations that made it easier to let your guard down. So, Lucas said, swirling the ice in his glass, "What's the plan for after this?" His eyes met mine, steady but curious. I shrugged, feeling oddly nervous even though I wanted to say yes to whatever came next. Honestly, I don't know. I hadn't thought past just enjoying the city. He smiled, that easy grin that made me want to lean in just a little closer. I like that. No plans. Just seeing where things go. Yeah, I said, taking a sip. The gin was crisp, a bit sharper than I expected, but it grew on me. It's kind of like this trip, no real map, just a bunch of random moments that somehow fit together. Lucas nodded. Exactly. Sometimes the best stories come from the unexpected. There was a pause, the kind that could feel heavy or light depending on how you handled it. I chose light. So tell me something no one at the hostel knows about you, I challenged. He raised an eyebrow, smirking. Oh, diving right into the deep end, huh? Hey, you did crawl into my bed last night. I think we're past small talk. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Fair point. Okay, no one knows I sing in the shower. Like full-on musicals, bad accents and all. I grinned. You're joking. Not even a little, he said, raising his glass. Shower concerts are the best. I laughed, feeling a little buzz from both the drink and the growing connection between us. I'll hold you to that. Maybe you can perform next time we're stuck in a blackout. Lucas leaned closer, his voice dropping just a bit. Only if you promise to join me. There was that flash again. Something electric and a little terrifying all at once. I swallowed, my heart thumping in a way that wasn't just from the gin. We talked for hours, moving from drinks to stories about our lives, our dreams, and the weird twists that brought us to this moment. The bar started to empty, the jukebox switched to slower songs, and the world outside felt like it had faded away. At some point, Lucas reached across the table and gently brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead. The touch was light, but sent a jolt straight through me. I didn't pull away. Hey, he said softly, his eyes searching mine. I'm really glad we met. Yeah, I whispered back. Me too. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was full of things unspoken but understood. I realized that night, under the soft light of a tiny bar in Lisbon, that maybe I was ready to stop running from whatever this was. We left the bar hand in hand, the cool night air wrapping around us like a promise. Walking back to the hostel felt different, less like two strangers and more like something just beginning. Back in the room, the city's hum was quieter, the old buildings settling once again. We didn't rush. There was no need. Just two people who had found something unexpected in a place neither of us had planned to look. Lucas pulled me close, his breath warm against my ear. Can I stay here tonight? I mean, with you. My heart skipped, but my answer was easy. I was hoping you'd ask. As we slipped under the same covers, this time no longer strangers, but something more, I thought about how sometimes the best stories come from the moments you least expect. And maybe, just maybe, this was the start of one I'd never want to end. There was a moment as we settled back into the room where everything felt suspended, like the world outside had paused, just for us. Lucas and I moved slowly, almost cautiously, like we were both trying to read the other's unspoken boundaries. The air between us was charged but gentle, as if we were carefully unpacking something fragile and new. I pulled the blanket over both of us, and he shifted closer, resting his head lightly on my shoulder. The warmth of him there was grounding in a way I hadn't realized I needed. For a while, we just lay like that, quiet except for the occasional creak of the old floorboards and our breathing syncing up. You know, Lucas said softly, I never thought a hostel bed could feel this comfortable. I chuckled, the sound low and real in the stillness. It's surprising what a blackout and a busted pipe can do. He smiled against my skin, and I felt a shiver run through me, not from the cold, but from the closeness. I'm glad you let me stay. Me too, I admitted. Honestly, I don't think I would have let anyone else. His fingers traced lazy circles on my arm, each touch light but deliberate. It's funny how strangers can feel less strange sometimes. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Yeah, like we were supposed to be here right now. He looked up at me then, eyes wide and honest, and I realized I was holding my breath. So what happens next? The question hung between us, heavy with possibility and uncertainty. I wasn't sure what next meant exactly, but I knew I didn't want the night to end. "We figure it out," I said, voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in my stomach. "One moment at a time." Lucas grinned, that easy, genuine grin that had already started to make my chest tighten in the best way. I like that. We talked until the early morning, sharing stories about our childhoods, the mistakes that made us who we are, the little dreams we rarely dared voice out loud. There was a rawness to those conversations, a vulnerability that surprised me but felt right. At one point, Lucas reached over and took my hand. His fingers curled around mine with a tenderness that sent warmth flooding through my veins. I don't want this to be just a one-night thing. Honestly, neither did I. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared of the unknown, scared of opening up and risking everything again. But looking into his eyes, I felt something stronger than fear, a quiet hope that maybe this time, things could be different. "Neither do I whispered, squeezing his hand. "Let's just see where this goes." And with that, the city outside slowly woke up, the first light seeping in through the window, casting a soft glow over us. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The morning sun filtered through the window, casting soft light on the room and waking me gently. Lucas was still asleep beside me, his breath slow and steady. I lay there, watching him for a while, feeling this mix of calm and something electric I couldn't quite put into words. It was weird, right? To feel this comfortable with someone you'd met less than 24 hours ago? But there it was. I finally rolled over, nudging him lightly. "Hey, sleepyhead." His eyes fluttered open, and for a second, he looked just as caught off guard as I felt. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "Morning." "Morning," I said, sitting up and stretching. "Did you sleep okay?" "Surprisingly well," he said, rubbing his eyes with the back of his hand. "Guess having company helped." I grinned. "Yeah, me too." We got up and shuffled through the usual hostel morning routine, brushing teeth, grabbing showers, trying not to wake the other guests too much. Lucas took the top bunk this time, and I stretched out on the bottom, still feeling the lingering warmth of sharing that bed. Downstairs, the hostel's small kitchen was already buzzing with the morning crowd. Over coffee and some bread we pulled from the common area shelf, we started talking about what to do with the day. "I was thinking of checking out that market near the river," Lucas said. "You up for it?" "Definitely," I said. I could use some distractions beyond hostel life. We wandered through the narrow streets, the city waking around us. The market was a riot of colors. Fresh fruit, spices, handmade jewelry, and the occasional street performer trying to catch a euro or two. Lucas was chatting with a vendor about the best place to get a proper pastel de nata, and I was just soaking it all in. We ended up sitting on a bench by the river, sharing one of those custard tarts, and watching the boats drift lazily by. Lucas pulled out his sketchbook and started doodling, his eyes flicking between the river and the paper. "You really get into this," I said, admiring the way his hand flowed over the page. "It's a way to slow down," he said. "Helps me see details I'd miss otherwise." I nodded, thinking about how much I'd been rushing through life lately, always chasing the next deadline or the next thing to do. "What about you?" Lucas asked, looking up. "What helps you slow down?" I thought about it. Funny enough, I think it's moments like this. Sitting still, watching the world, sharing it with someone. He smiled, and I felt that spark again, the one that had been there since that first night. Later, as the sun dipped lower, we found ourselves back in the neighborhood near the hostel. We stopped at a small cafe, and over another round of coffee, the conversation turned quieter, more serious. "I don't know if I've ever felt this, connected with someone so quickly," Lucas admitted, stirring his cup. "Me neither," I said honestly. "But maybe that's a good thing." He looked at me, his eyes searching, and I could see the vulnerability behind his usual easygoing charm. "Are you scared?" I asked gently. He nodded. "Yeah. Sometimes the idea of something new is exciting, but also terrifying. What if it doesn't last? Or what if it changes everything?" I reached across the table and took his hand. "I don't have the answers, but I do know I want to figure it out with you, one step at a time." A slow smile spread across his face, and he squeezed my hand back. We walked back to the hostel, in the fading light, the city's hum wrapping around us like a warm blanket. Back in our room, the quiet closeness returned. This time, there was no awkwardness in crawling into bed together. It felt natural, like coming home. As I drifted off, I realized that sometimes the best stories don't come from grand plans or perfect timing. They come from taking a chance, from two strangers sharing a bed and finding something real in the dark. The last morning in Lisbon arrived quietly, the kind of morning that feels like the calm right before a turning point. Lucas and I sat on the small windowsill of our hostel room, coffee cups warming our hands, watching the city come alive in its usual, unhurried way. Neither of us said much at first. The silence was comfortable, filled with the easy understanding that had grown between us. I glanced over at him, noticing the little things, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the soft way he tucked hair behind his ear. It struck me how much more present I felt with him around, how the exhaustion and distance I'd carried before seemed to fade. "I'm going to miss this," Lucas said quietly, breaking the silence. "Me too," I admitted. "Not just the city, but this. Us." He nodded, his gaze steady. "I know it's been just a few days, but it feels like we've been here longer, like we found something worth holding on to." I reached out, taking his hand in mine. It wasn't dramatic or flashy, just a simple, honest gesture, but it meant everything. "I don't want this to be a story we tell about a trip that ended. I want to see where it goes." Lucas smiled, the kind of smile that makes you believe things can be better than you imagined. Me too. We talked a bit longer about the practical stuff, how we'd keep in touch, maybe visit each other, figure out the messy parts of timing and distance. But beneath all that, there was a shared hope, a quiet promise to try. As I packed my bag, I realized something. Sometimes the best trips aren't the ones where you cross off every landmark or take a perfect photo. Sometimes they're the ones where you find someone who reminds you what it feels like to be seen. Lucas stood by the door, waiting for me. Before I left, he pulled me into a hug, warm and steady. "Thank you," he whispered, "for letting me in." "Thank you for showing up," I said back. Walking away, I felt lighter than I had in months. The city faded behind me, but the memory of that strange, unexpected connection stayed vivid. We were still strangers in many ways, but no longer alone. And somehow, that made all the difference.